I spent the last week in August and the majority of September traveling around England and Ireland and doing everything from working to traveling the countryside to seeing some cities that I've wanted to see for a really long time, and also some book shopping. It was such an incredible trip and a literal dream come true for me for many reasons, and I took so much footage of my entire journey. And while it's definitely been a process getting it all put together, it's been so much fun to relive the trip and get it all prepped for you to see my adventure. And let's be honest, this one's a little bit for me as well, so that I can come back and reminisce anytime I want about the incredible trip I just took. In this video specifically, I'm going to cover the Ireland leg of my trip. However, I will be putting out 2 videos about England at least, and a book shopping with me video from my entire trip. So please subscribe to the channel if you are interested in seeing all of that. With that, hello everybody, welcome to Bandits and Bookworms. My name is Deidre, and today, let's travel to Ireland. Getting out of the Austin airport was nothing crazy. Our plane took off on time, everything was fine. My route was supposed to be that I was supposed to go from Austin to Chicago, lay over in Chicago for about an hour, then go from Chicago to London, have a couple of hours in London, and then go to Cork after that. And then I'd be staying in Cork for the next week or so. As our plane was getting close to Chicago, we were told by our captain that we were getting diverted to St. Louis because a storm had come in over Chicago and shut down the O'Hare airport. So we diverted to St. Louis and we sat there for a while. We ended up sitting on the tarmac in St. Louis for about 2 hours before we were finally cleared for takeoff to go back to Chicago. But the storm was still making its way over Chicago, so we had to go around it. We had to go to Kansas City, up through much of the Midwest, and then finally looped around to Chicago, which ended up taking us almost 2 hours. By the time we landed in Chicago, it was after midnight, which was about a 4-hour delay of when we were supposed to get there. After we landed, I got a bunch of texts, one right after the other, from United Airlines saying that my flight to London had been delayed over and over and over again, until the final text I got from them said that it had been delayed until 2:22 a.m., which was perfect. Then I got a text 2 minutes after that my flight had been canceled. The other thing that happened with this is that United Airlines couldn't rebook me within 3 days of my flight. We were told that all of the bags that were supposed to go on this specific London flight were going to be at a specific carousel, so I headed there next. I ended up waiting there until about 3:30 in the morning, and nobody could find my bag. There were several passengers in my situation. I wasn't the only one, and I know that the storm probably did cause some problems for the airport, it seemed like, but it was a little startling to me that my bag was just nowhere to be found. Also, for the record, I had been up since 3:30 in the morning the previous morning because I was trying to adjust my sleep schedule and hopefully get a little bit of sleep on the plane on my way out to London. After talking with some of the United employees about my baggage situation and everything, they just recommended that I go to a hotel and get some sleep. So I did. I went to my hotel room after being awake for more than 24 hours with no way to get to London, let alone Cork. I had no plan. I texted my boss before I went to sleep, hoping I didn't wake him up, letting him know the situation, and then went to bed. Very frustrated, very annoyed. After this, I slept for about 4 hours. I got up at about 7:30, 8 o'clock the next morning, talked to my boss, got my flight rebooked, attended a couple of work meetings since I was available and I might as well. And then I needed to head to the airport because I was still without a bag. When I got to the baggage claim area and I talked to United, they told me that they did in fact have my bag, but they couldn't tell me how long it would take to get it. So we waited. My next plane didn't take off until 4:45 p.m. I had gotten there around noon, so I had plenty of time to wait. I did have a view of the same baggage claim area for the entire time that I was waiting, so here's that. Luckily, there was a small cafe in that same baggage claim area, so I went and I got the driest sandwich you've ever eaten, a very sweet lemon loaf, and a pumpkin spice latte because let's be honest, I kind of deserved it after all of this. And it cost $27. I know airport prices are airport prices, but in the state that I was in and with how tired I was, this felt like an assault. My wallet was terrified. I was terrified. It was a bad time. Eventually, I went back to the baggage claim clerks because it was about 2 p.m. now and I had still not seen my bags just to figure out where we were at in the process. Turns out they couldn't tell me because all that their systems would give them access to see was the fact that somebody had accepted the assignment to get my bag, but they couldn't tell me when and they couldn't tell me how far away the bag was or what was happening. So I waited some more until 3:30 p.m. Still no bag. At that point, I was an hour and 15 minutes away from my flight taking off. I had to just go, abandon my bag in O'Hare, and try to get to Cork. So I do manage to make my plane. I get there in time, no big deal. When I started seeing all of the British culture pop up on the flight, I got really emotional. I almost cried. I didn't. I held it together. I didn't cry. but I almost did. I got rebooked with British Airways, which is why there was so much British culture on this flight. Seeing their safety video, which was super cute.
I must confess, a sentiment of the most tender nature.
Welcome, everyone. We will now demonstrate the safety features of this aircraft, and your attention is essential, as this may be different from any aircraft that you've flown on before.
And then I was able to also get my first cup of tea, which was surprisingly good for it being airline food. I also took this picture of our meal because the utensil said tuck in, and I just thought that was great. We also got this little chocolate mousse thing, which was surprisingly tasty, but that might have just been my very tired and honestly still a little hungry brain talking, and I was just really into it. In my actual terminal, we had to go through another passport check and a smaller security line, which wouldn't be that big of a deal or anything to note at all because it's just an airport. What made this notable was one specific guy. As I was getting through security and I gotten through the scanners and I was waiting for my bags to get through the scanners. I say bags. I had one bag. I had my backpack, which had 4 books in it and a laptop. That's essentially all I have to my name at this point. I'm watching these security people talk to people that they're having to inspect their bags a little bit more detailed or whatever. And there's one guy who's getting really frustrated. There's this really kind of petite security officer working with him. She turns around after having grabbed something out of his bag, and I see her with 5 containers like this of Land O'Lakes butter, which in my deliriously tired, aggravated state, it was very difficult for me to not just collapse on the floor laughing right there. Why is this man trying to get 5 things of Land O'Lakes butter into the country? Land O'Lakes butter isn't even that good. Why are you trying to get it into the country? But then literally not a week after this happened, the TSA tweeted out, "Peanut butter is a liquid. We said what we said." And it just made me laugh because it reminded me of the butter guy. I don't know what he was doing. It's not even that good. Why are you trying to get Land O'Lakes butter into England? I don't understand. After that happened, after security, I had a couple of hours, so I posted up in a pub in my terminal and took a very tired selfie of me with my mimosa, which, by the way, the orange juice was so much better there than it is in the US. Orange juice in the US is just sugar. I touched base with my Irish coworkers while I was here, one of whom was supposed to pick me up from the Cork airport when I landed there a little bit later. Of course, there was yet one more hitch in my journey, which was that my flight out of London to Cork was delayed by about 40 minutes, which meant that my coworker, hi Chris, if you're watching, sorry again for all the trouble here, he could no longer pick me up because he had meetings he needed to get to, which was no big deal. I did, however, when I got to the Cork airport, have to file a delayed bag claim, and Aer Lingus, because of the fact that I had rebooked my flight and it hadn't gotten lost in transit with the flight that I had come in on, and I had just kind of abandoned it in O'Hare, wasn't sure that they were going to be able to get it to me at all. So now I'm in Cork, but I have no clothes, I have no toiletries, I haven't showered really, I'm not feeling great. I feel kind of like a zombie, but hopefully my bag gets to me soon. That's what I'm hoping. So as a result, though, of Chris not being able to take me, I did get to take a very interesting cab ride with a guy named Tony. He was my driver and he was a trip. He had one of the most traditional Irish accents that I heard the entire time I was in Ireland. And when he realized that I was not only American, but had no bag and therefore something had clearly gone wrong on my flight, he told me about Pennies, which my coworkers had also recommended to me, but it is a discount clothing store effectively. He also gave me directions on how to get there about 6 times during the course of this cab ride. So thank you, Tony. I really appreciate it. After that cab ride, I was dropped off at my hotel. So I checked into the hotel at about 12:30 p.m. I got up to my room and saw that they had left me a cute plate of brownies there with a handwritten note thanking me for coming and if I needed anything to let them know, which I think was very cute. I also think it's because I was there for business travel and they saw it, but it was very cute nonetheless. After taking a couple hour nap, I did end up going to Penny's to do some shopping. I didn't take any footage while I was there because I was so focused on just getting myself to feel like a human again. But I did get to get my very first I'm in Europe feels, and that was in this town square, which I did take footage of. Also, as a side note, from this point forward, I do try to not have people in my shots, but I was in very populated areas, and so there's not much success with that. But if you see weird angles, now you know why. I ended up just getting a simple long sleeve shirt and a pair of kind of dress pants that were way too long for me. I am 5'2" and all torso, so pants are usually long for me, but these were funny because they had to be cuffed in order to fit me, and It fit and it was fine and it worked. It was fine. After that, I showered, I changed, and then I met my coworkers so that we could go to a team building event that we had that night. And I finally, for the first time since I had started traveling, felt like a human again. Our team building event took place at this bar complex called the Mardyke, which was a very, very cool area in downtown Cork. It was an easy walk from our hotel. Everything's walkable in Europe, which is phenomenal. It was here that I finally got to meet up with everybody from the Irish office, which I was so excited to meet them all. And I also got to have my very first Irish Guinness, which are different in Ireland than they are even in England. They're different. In the US, I don't really like Guinness. I'm not a huge dark beer kind of person. I'm one of the only yahoos I know that's really into like IPAs. And so I don't really like Guinness, but I like it in Ireland. So if you don't like Guinness in the US, try it in Ireland and see how you feel about it, because maybe you'll like it. Who knows? I also ordered something called a porn star martini, mostly because I wanted to say those words out loud at a work event because I thought it was funny. And in the US, it's not really a thing. So I ordered it. It was very good. It came with a little Pac-Man on top because I was in like an arcade themed bar inside the Mardyke when I got it. So that's what that looks like there. Overall, that night was a lot of fun and it was a perfect way to decompress and also set myself up to sleep really well that night. Once we finally crashed. The following day, I took a cab into the office in the afternoon because while I hadn't really intended on taking the morning to recover, my body decided I was going to and slept through my alarm. So I went in the afternoon and I still had no bag. I had not heard about where my bag was yet or anything like that. On my way to the office, my cabbie told me about the Marina Market, which is this kind of food court merchant area that is next to the office that my company uses for the Irish office. My cabbie was talking about the fact that it was almost shut down by their city council a few months before for safety reasons due to the factories that it was kind of nearby. It's in this like industrial area of Cork, but I'm so glad that they didn't because it is so cool. And it turns out that the city kind of like rose up and was like, you will not take this from us. And I'm very glad that they did because it's worth saving. Here's a picture of me with some of my coworkers in the office. My friend Jeremy there, he is from the US and was on a video call with Isabella there when I was taking this picture, and we turned around the monitor so that he could be in the picture. We ended up going to the Marina Market for a late lunch / early dinner. So here's some footage of that. Like I said, it was very cool. It's in this old warehouse building and there's all these different like shops set up inside of it. I ended up getting these Malaysian laksa chips and they were incredible. Thank you, Isabella, for the recommendation if you're watching my video right now. Then after the workday, we walked along the water to get back to the hotel, which was directly in the city center. We spent a couple of hours relaxing at the hotel, just decompressing, finally getting a moment to myself. And then during that time, I got a text that my bag had been delivered and I managed to recover my bag. So here is me, still very tired, having changed again back into my old clothing, getting my bag. After getting into a fresh change of clothes, I then met out with a couple of coworkers and we went out down Oliver Plunkett, which is the Cork equivalent of like 6th Street or like the bar district effectively. And we spent the evening at a traditional Irish pub. Saturday morning, I was supposed to get together with some of my coworkers to explore the city, but when I met up with two of them in the lobby of the hotel, they had both contracted some form of illness. One of them was feeling okay until she wasn't, and she decided to take the day, and one of them was just down and out for the count. It turned out that I had the morning to myself, which ended up being a little bit of a blessing in disguise because I got to just go and relax and do some of the things that I wanted to do in Cork, which I don't know how much my coworkers would have necessarily wanted to join me, not that they would have hated it, but it ended up being just a very relaxing, chill morning. I started out by going to Vibes and Scribes, which is an independent bookstore, both a new version and a used version. I picked up a couple of books in there, which will be featured in my later book shopping video. Please subscribe if you would like to see that. And then I wandered over to Cork Coffee Roasters, where I got an iced vanilla latte, which doesn't look like much here, but it was really, really good. There was no seating inside of the cafe, however, and I didn't film inside because they were pretty busy and I didn't want to bother anybody. So I ended up posting up outside of this Costa Coffee, and I read one of the books that I had bought for a while. I did also make friends with some pigeons, but I was kind of late to filming them, so here's them walking away from me. As I was reading, I glanced up at this building that ended up being an art museum. It's called the Crawford Art Gallery. The building was built in 1724 and it was turned into the Cork School of Design in 1850 and then turned into the Art Gallery in 1979. I ended up wandering through here for an hour and a half or so, and there was some really cool art from the last 3 centuries or so, including some plaster casts of some really famous pieces of art and sculptures. There was these really old books that were really cool. Also this piece of just these blacked out globes, which is supposed to represent how we're all just people floating around on this rock in space, and it's kind of neat. Then I went back to Costa Coffee to wait for Chris, and I got a berry refresher and these shortbread cookies that were actually surprisingly good. I read some more of Cork stories, and then while I was sitting there, this VW bus pulled up and just started playing The Last Train to Clarksville by the Monkees, which was super cool, and then it continued to play bangers after that for like 30 minutes, so that was really neat. Then I ended up actually meeting up with Chris, and we wandered around Cork for a while. He took me through this park, went into this tiny building that had a bunch of artwork in it as well, which is pretty neat. This super neat bridge, which according to Chris is the only one of its kind left. And ended up hiking up to the Cork City Jail, which is a prison that operated from 1824 to 1927. It housed some political prisoners as well as prisoners from the Irish War for Independence, among other things. It was the closest thing to a castle that I had been in at this point in time, and it was super neat to see. Even this main atrium is very, very cool, which apparently they do weddings in this atrium, which I didn't even think about, but had I not gotten married at the Ren Fair, this may have been a contender for me. I'm just putting it out there. They also have some of the original graffiti from some of the prisoners behind this plexiglass, and some displays for some of those famous prisoners like Constance Markovich, who was the first woman elected to Westminster Parliament. After 1927, the prison closed, and it didn't reopen as a visitor attraction until 1993. So very cool to tour. It looked really neat. It was a lot of interesting, fun times to be going through there. If you couldn't tell by now, I am a fan of the creepy, kind of more macabre stuff. So we also walked by Sunday's Well Church, which was the first cathedral that I had seen while I was in Europe. Many, many more to be featured in later videos, but this was the first one, so I felt it worth pointing out. After the jail, we ate at Quinlan's, which is a seafood restaurant also in downtown Cork, and it was so good. I had a seafood chowder that was incredible but not pictured because I didn't even think about it. I was so ready for it. But then I also got these chili prawns, which were sizzling when they got to my table. For dessert, I had a Bailey's creme brulee, and Chris had this cheesecake, and it was just all so good. It was very tasty. It was very cute. Would recommend. Go to Quinlan's if you like seafood. On Sunday, my other coworkers were feeling better, so we all piled into Chris's car and made the small trek over from Cork to Cove, which is where we planned to visit Spike Island. Cove, like Cork, is a port town, and it plays host to a lot of cruise ships. In fact, while we were there was one in port, the Azamara Quest. Our first stop in Cove was the Heritage Center, located right on the pier. It's attached to the Cove train station, and it definitely looks like it. One thing I found funny was the fact that the very first flag I saw when coming into the building was the American flag, and once you got in and looked straight up, you could see the Irish flag, but you saw the American flag first, which I found interesting. They had a bunch of exhibits about the various ships that have come into port there, as well as immigration practices. Most notably, Cove was the final place the Titanic docked before it sank, docking in Cove on April 11th, 1912, and sinking 4 days later on the 15th. They had a tribute to the 123 passengers who boarded the Titanic in Cove, with each having their own square on this quilt embroidered with their name and age. There was a small teaser of Spike Island, as well as several other exhibits on maritime travel through history as it related specifically to Cove, the potato famine, and additional artifacts and exhibits from the Titanic. After that, we wandered through Cove, which is really just the cutest little port town, and I thoroughly enjoyed walking around downtown. But then it was time for the main event, which was heading off on a ferry to Spike Island. They were doing a safety announcement before they let us have run of the island, and these people just kind of ran off down the beach while our guide was talking to us, so that was entertaining. We had the option of doing a guided or self-guided tour of the island, and we opted to go for self-guided so that we could take it at our own pace. Spike Island was first fortified in 1779 and was actually prompted by the outbreak of the American Revolution. Cork was a supplier for the British forces operating in North America, and therefore it was necessary to protect the harbor from potential threats, and they didn't know what we were going to do after the Revolutionary War was over. It was later converted from a military installation to a prison in 1847 to help handle the number of theft convictions that sprouted during the Great Famine. Essentially, it's Ireland's Alcatraz. There are a number of military installations still tourable, including some of the most haunted hallways I have ever been in. I mean, look at this thing. I had a goal the whole trip of being haunted by something, so anytime something creepy came up, my friends and family would point it out to me. This one's winning as far as my goal getting haunted is. Yes! Did you say uh-oh, Deidre? Take me. Oh, there's not much up here.
Well, it's a creepy tilted.
And then it's a creepy tilted. That's also true. We also found the world's creepiest doll in this display here, which is definitely haunted, as well as a working organ, also definitely haunted. There were palm trees growing on the island as well as a playground, which as a bunch of working professionals in their 30s, we could not turn down the opportunity to play on it. After that, we ended up in the punishment block, and the video I have of this building really just doesn't do it justice to how dark it was in there. My phone's camera did a really great job of brightening everything up, but it does remove a certain amount of the creep factor that was just kind of ever present during our tour of this area. There were a couple of modern art installations that were kind of sunk into the old cells, as well as a blurb about the case that one of the books I bought is about, the Ireland's Eye murder. There were some more exhibits of the prison cells as well as some artwork done by the prisoners on display in a couple of the rooms, which included this really random one called Fubby, which told us to run if we ever saw him. We were all very perplexed by this particular piece of art, but then there was also this one of this dog that just looked like a very good boy. In the next exhibit, it was showing us the conditions of what prisoner transportation might look like, and we all got fooled by this fake little bat that's up above one of the doors. Our second to last stop on the island was the prisoners' graveyard, and although there are likely people buried all over the island, this is the only marked graveyard that still exists today. Prisoners were not buried with headstones that mark their names, but instead just their prisoner numbers, which you may see here. We did pause to take a peek at the oldest building on the island, the Bleak House. It's hard to see it, but you can kind of peek at it through the trees right here. It was built in 1821 and used as a hospital until the mid-19th century when it was converted into married officers' quarters. After this, we saw a few other ruins of some guard houses and some other buildings, and then finally ended up in the ruins of one of the main residential areas of the island, which was really neat to see. These were a bunch of houses and chapels surrounding this courtyard area. It was just neat to see a true ruin of something. It was fascinating to see nature take it over again. Then we headed back to the mainland where I spied an Irish telephone booth, so that was very entertaining. And then Meredith and I decided to go to a restaurant called Tequila Jack's for dinner, which honestly was a bold choice since we live in Texas, but it was right next to our hotel and way too convenient to give up. And while it definitely wasn't the best Mexican food I've ever had, not by a long shot, it was actually better than I expected it to be. This was a work trip after all, so most of the footage I have from this point forward is just of the food that I ate, since I was mostly working during Monday and Tuesday then, though I do have this footage of my outfit of the day, which I thought was pretty cute. I started out on Monday morning with some tea, another full Irish breakfast just because that's what was available at my hotel, and then I worked from the office for the morning. For lunch, I really wanted to try out this place called Stew Store because they had a tikka masala that looked incredible, and spoiler alert, it was incredible. On our way back to the office, we stopped at this Dinky Donut stand because everybody wanted to try some of their donuts, and they were amazing. So amazing, in fact, that I forgot to take any footage of them before we dove into them, so they look kind of sad here, but I promise they were very good. For dinner, we did a small ladies' night and went to this restaurant called Market Lane, which is one of the ones that gets all lit up on Oliver Plunkett, and it was shown in my first little Oliver Plunkett exploration area. We had French onion soup, and I had braised lamb as the main dish, and it was fantastic. Isabella took us to this bar called Arthur Main's Pharmacy, which was an old Victorian pharmacy that was converted into a bar, which was super, super neat to be in, and probably my favorite bar, at least, that we went to for sure. Maybe my favorite venue that we went to. The drinks were phenomenal. The one pictured here is called Who Took the Soup, and while it does look like soup, it is an iced drink, in fact. There we go, here we go. They're so tasty. On Tuesday, I worked from the office for the final time, and while we were having lunch at the Marina Market, I found this book vending machine, and C4, which was labeled as a crime book, was calling to me. After fiddling with the payment on this vending machine for like way too long to be considered a sane person, I got my hands on it.
Look at me go.
She looks criminal.
Watch it be the same one that I like bought at the bookstore the other day.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I've actually heard of this.
And the dedication was for Deirdre, which I thought was just fate speaking to me. I took one last look at the Marina Market because honestly it was that cool, and then was going to try to get some footage of it starting to rain on the way back when I dropped my phone in the parking lot and completely shattered the screen. So 120 euro later and one very shitty phone screen attached to my phone, I was able to get some footage of our last meal that we had here before we all headed out the next day. We ate at Sophie's Rooftop, which is located in this hotel called the Dean, which I feel like really looks like it belongs in an evil building in Hall of Fame. I had this neon green drink, which I don't remember what it was called. I didn't write it down, but it made me look like I was directly out of a sci-fi movie, which I found hysterical. And also this seafood pasta, which was very good. We then went to one last bar, which I also neglected to write the name down. And it kind of became a send-off for me before I went to London because I was the last American in that group. All in all, Ireland was such a cool place to visit, and I am determined to get back someday. I really want to go out to the West Coast and see some of that because I stayed pretty local to Cork this time, and Cork is an amazing city and I really recommend that people go visit. But I do want to explore more of Ireland next time. And hopefully there aren't travel escapades that torpedo like a day of my trip. In the next leg of the trip, I met up with my family in London, and then we went to Cambridge and York. Those will be follow-up videos coming to a YouTube channel, this one in fact, near you soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe so that you can keep up with the rest of my travel vlogs, which will be coming out in the coming weeks, and also the rest of my bookish content. I know this wasn't really a bookish focused video, but it will be sort of more in the next videos because Ireland was a work trip, and so I was kind of at the whims of what other people wanted to do, whereas in England I could be a little bit more in control of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go and see. So lots more bookish stuff in England. Thanks again so much for watching, and I hope you are practicing safe text. Bye.